All right, so let's start the task of getting Firebase hooked up to our application. The first thing that we need to do is install it, and we can actually grab the scripts for Firebase from the documentation. So let's come over here and just grab the last two. We've already got Angular coming in, so we really just need Firebase and Angular Fire. So let's copy those, and coming back over to our project, let's go to index.html. And we actually have to bring Firebase in after Angular is already on the page. So maybe we can just put this, say, last here. We can just come down here and throw that in as a script tag. All right, so the next thing we'll do is come over here to our scripts directory, and we'll go to app.js, and we actually have to bring in Firebase as a module. So we'll come over here and say that we also want Firebase. And so that will make all of the Firebase pieces accessible in our application. And the first piece that we'll make use of is called Firebase Array. So let's come over here to our factory. Our classifieds factory right now is set up to do this GET request to our data that's living right here in our project directory. But what we want is a reference to Firebase instead. So as a first step, let's inject Firebase Array so that we can make use of it. So Firebase Array. And then let's get rid of this function right here. And instead, let's make a reference to our Firebase. So we can say var ref equals a new Firebase. And so this is where you'll put in your own Firebase URL. I'm going to come over here and grab mine from my dashboard. So I'll just copy this and come back over and paste it in. So our reference is set up now. And now instead of returning this getClassifieds function, what we'll do is return a ref. So we'll say ref, and then we'll come over here and say we want it to be a Firebase array. And so we'll make a Firebase array out of our reference. All right, so the next thing we need is to take all of our classifieds data here and import it into our Firebase. And what we could do is we could use the import tool that Firebase provides, but that's actually not going to let us make use of proper IDs that are provided by Firebase Array. What we would get is just a sequential set of IDs like 0, 1, 2, 3, but what we would really want is for Firebase to provide a unique hashed ID for all of our data. And to do that, let's actually send our data from our application to our Firebase to populate it. So let's come back over here, and I'm going to grab all of the data in this array. Let's just grab the whole array. So we'll copy everything. And now let's come over here to our controller. And the first thing that we'll do is come down here to the bottom and paste this in. Let's just say var data equals our array. And so that's a very large array for this page, but that's all right. We can make it look a little bit nicer. And then here, let's come down, we'll say var Firebase equals our classifieds factory dot ref. So now we have a variable pointing to our classifieds factory reference. And then all we need to do is we need to loop over all of our data here and send it to our Firebase. So let's see how that works. Let's do Angular for each. And we want to for each over all of our data. So that's pointing now to our data that's just above. For each over data. And we'll say that for each of the items in our data array, we want to send it to Firebase with the add method, the $add method. So we'll say Firebase add our item. All right, so now if we run this in our browser, we should get all of our data showing up in our Firebase. So let's save this and see if it works. We come back over here, and all we would need to do is a refresh on our page. All right, so it looks like there's an error right away. So let's see what's going on in the console. So unknown provider, Firebase array. So, okay, we forgot a letter in our Firebase array. So back over in our factory, we need to make sure that we call it Firebase array instead of Firbase array. And just while we're at it, I'm realizing that we have to comment out what we had before. Up here, our classifieds factory is still looking for this getClassifieds method, but that, of course, no longer exists on our classifieds factory. All right, so let's see if this works out now. If we refresh, our page loaded successfully, and let's see if we get all of our data here. And as you can see, it's all showing up now under ngClassifieds. We've got all of our data structure still in place, and we've got this unique hash for each of our items. So that's how we can load data into Firebase. And now that we've got that in there, let's get rid of all of this down here. We only needed to use this once, so now we can just delete everything. All right, so all of our data is now in our Firebase. So the next thing we'll want to do is read it so that we can have it show up on our screen. And this is actually very simple. So let's see how we do it. Let's come back up here just above where we commented out. And let's say that our VM classifieds is going to be equal to classifiedsfactory.ref. We save that and come back over and refresh our page. Now we've got all of our classifieds showing up again. One thing that we don't have, though, is if we come over to filters, we don't have our list of categories. But let's fix that now. What we'll have to do is we'll have to say that we want to wait until all of our data is loaded and then get our categories. So we'll come down here and we'll say VM classifieds when loaded, and we use this $loaded function provided by Firebase to see when our data is loaded. We'll use the then method to say we want our classifieds, and what we want is to set VM categories equal to a call to the getCategories function, and getCategories will take those classifieds we just got from our callback. All right, so if you recall before, what we were doing is we're saying VM categories is equal to the getCategories function call on our classified, so pretty much the same thing. And once again, that getCategories function is down here, just loops over everything and provides a list of categories. And so now let's delete this and let's come back over and see if this works. We'll refresh. And now when we go to filters and look for our categories, we've got all of our categories showing up again. So once again, what we did is we just waited until all of our data was loaded, and then we set our categories to the getCategories function call. All right, so we've got all of our data coming into our application directly from Firebase. The next thing we'll do is set up a way to add data to our Firebase from our application. So when a user comes over and says new classified, obviously when they hit save, we want this data to go to our Firebase, and then we'll be able to read it back into our application afterwards.